Special thanks to Something Touches Beck for allowing the story to be shared. Check the description for the details, and now on to the story.
Dropship 45, perform final check.
Private Anna Jones checked the restraints securing her in her cocoon. The brass preferred that term to crash chair. Her cocoon was designed to hold all 54 kilograms of Anna while wearing her 22 kilos of gear, including her rifle and extra magazines, even during the hellacious forces of deceleration and impact. Satisfied, Anna kept her head against the pillow and concentrated on calming her breathing. Her mind wandered back to the before times. The late spring sun beat with unusual warmth on the flat prairie land east of Calgary, giving the still air a slight thermal shimmer. 8-year-old Anna Jones and her 9-year-old neighbor Bobby were exploring the reeds in the marshy depression that separated their two families' farms. Bobby, like Anna, was a little short for his age, and an escaping curl fell over his forehead like the fur on the heads of the bison in the nearby pasture. Anna's hand suddenly shot into the water, emerging in a fist. Opening it, she exposed a dark brown bug about 2 centimeters long. "It's a pred. It's a diving beetle," she said as she broke into a wide, open smile. Bobby, unlike Anna, was ahead of his grade in reading, especially anything he thought of as science. Employing his most pretentious tone, he said, "Predaceous diving beetle. Did you know that the brown ones are local? Dytiscus circumcinctus are usually blackish, or even dark green, but all of them have yellow rings around their eyes. They are voracious hunters that will eat anything they can catch, especially mosquito larvae." "Good. Go eat more mosquitoes," said Anna, returning the harmless insect to the water. Anna was briefly startled out of her memories by the sucking gasp of the hatch closing between the dropship and its interstellar carrier. The air inside became very still, and a disembodied voice announced,
"Dropship 45 is secure for drop."
As they watched the beetle dive away, Bobby said, "I'm going to become a scientist." Then, looking up at the sky, he said, "I'm going to join the interstellar program and get as far away from this farm as I can go." On the news last night, they reported that the colony on Aru just hit 1 million settlers. Anna had heard Bobby's older brother grumble about how much time Bobby spent on his computer, avoiding farm work. "You told me about Aru." Anna pondered deeply, trying to not look stupid in front of her friend. "That's the one named after the ancient Egyptian world of the afterlife, right?" "Yes, a garden world of prairies and forests 30 light years away." Anna turned and looked across her family's ranch. Most of the bison were lying down, sleeping through the afternoon heat. Grass and vibrant wildflowers carpeted the ground between the shaggy brown mounds. A pungent mix of marsh decay, sweet flowers, grass pollen, and bison dung hung in the air. Anna raised her eyes and watched the dark silhouette of a hawk silently descending through the clear blue sky. "I like it here. I like warm days when the bison sleep. Why would I go 30 light years to see another prairie?" A hard jolt signaled separation from the dropship carrier, like being hit in the back of the chair with a baseball bat. An even harder acceleration signaled the dropship powering into its re-entry trajectory. As the engines cut off a few seconds later, lesser bumps indicated the separation of the first round of decoys, and Anna felt Freefall's weightlessness and serene silence for a brief few minutes. It was Anna's 10th birthday, which meant it was the 10th anniversary of the death of her mother. Every year, Anna's father somberly remembered one of those two events. A picture above the hearth showed her father, arm around her mother, standing at the end of the driveway. In that picture, he was tall, raw-boned, and beardless. Light smoldered in his gold-flecked blue eyes. Bison were in the field to the left, the calving barn was back a bit on the right, and their new house stood directly behind them in the background. Anna found her father, as she always did on this anniversary, standing, staring at that picture, with a glass in one hand and a half-full bottle of Crown Royal in the other. The big screen on the left wall was projecting a news feed, and Anna sat down to watch an article about the colonies on Aru being under attack. Anna took a passing interest in the images of hordes of creatures that, at first glance, looked remarkably like the diving beetles out in the marsh. Except these beetles were 4 meters long, and the square cube law dictated that their legs were straight pillars, more like those of deer than of insects. Their back pair were just under a meter long, while the middle pair were nearly 2 meters long, holding the whole body at a pronounced slope. Where the front pair of legs should have been, these aliens had manipulator arms that, in the videos, were holding some gnarly-looking weapons. The similarity to beetles had earned the aliens the media moniker Ditids. Anna looked once more at her motionless father before grabbing her coat and black rubber farm boots and stepping into the crisp autumn air. "Happy birthday, Anna," she thought. A few bison were standing together in the southeast pasture. Above them, geese were making their way south, their silhouettes against the hazy sky, looking almost like a formation of fighters. As the dropship entered the upper atmosphere, the tranquility of free fall was replaced by shimmies, tremors, and a rumble, like the digestive sounds that emanate from the soft belly of a contented bison laying in the midday sun. 14-year-old Anna and her friend Bobby were halfway across the pasture when they discovered it was no longer empty. A bison bull stepped out from behind a bush near the far side. His profile spoke of power and ageless strength. He stood 2 meters at the shoulder and was 3.5 meters long, 1,000 kilos of hormonal rage. "Always one for book smarts," Bobby whispered. "A bison can reach 56 kilometers per hour, while the fastest human on record managed only 32 kilometers per hour in the 50-meter dash." "That's because," said Anna as she turned and ran, "the human wasn't being chased by a bison." She was already diving between the barbed wire fence strands when she heard Bobby's piercing scream behind her. Irony is the most potent force in the universe. Bobby would never leave Earth, and Anna was dropping onto Aru. As the amplitude of the vibration intensified, Anna felt herself getting pulled further into her cocoon, and the rumble of a contented bison transformed into the bellow of a charging bull. In response to the attack, the government instituted a massive research and development effort to create the technologies necessary for a real interstellar navy. Innovations in sensors, weapons, communications, and tactics that work at vast distances, enduring faster-than-light travel. It was a boom time for people in the technology and manufacturing sectors, but much less so for bison farmers. As taxes and costs increased, Anna's father clenched his mouth tighter, and the us in us versus them got smaller and smaller. Meanwhile, the Ditids, when they weren't hunting down settlers, were fortifying the hell out of Aru. Anything that entered orbit above the planet was destroyed, as were any shuttles that attempted atmospheric entry. The rumble and vibration were replaced by a tortured scream and violent shaking as the atmosphere tried, unsuccessfully, to get out of the way of the falling dropship. The ablative heat shielding added its material to the wall of flame, engulfing the inbound troops. Somewhere in the maelstrom, another round of decoys added their trails to the confusion. From the day Anna got her driver's license, she spent as much time at Bobby's new home, in town, and closer to medical care as she could get away with. But the gap between their worlds was growing, and Anna felt more and more ignorant and left behind. "Oh God, Anna, you can't sneak from space to a planet's surface. It's high school physics. Descending into a gravity well converts potential energy into kinetic energy. The velocity you had while in orbit represents more kinetic energy. The raw amount of kinetic energy you need to dissipate will be seen. It doesn't matter if you employ a fiery aerobraking maneuver or use god-awful big engines. There is nothing subtle about an atmospheric entry." At 9 Gs, her cocoon enveloped her tight enough to give anybody claustrophobia. Breathing became labored, like a bison sitting on her chest, and her eyes felt like they were about to go somewhere else. "Look," Bobby continued, "there are 2 forms of camouflage, the kind where your adversary doesn't see you, and the kind where you blind the adversary with too much signal so they can't get a lock on you. The first approach doesn't work for atmospheric re-entry, so we're going with the second approach. The dropships have ablative heat shields that not only dissipate energy, but convert it into a massive fireball of ionized atmosphere, plasma, and fine bits of radio-reflective metal. We will drop hundreds of dropships accompanied by thousands of small decoys that produce fireballs that look just like the dropships. The fireballs will overlap so that planetary defenses cannot predict where the actual ships are within the cloud of fire and radar reflections. Still, time is our enemy. The longer we are in descent, the more of us that will get intercepted. To get around this, We will come in at as steep an angle as possible, where a shuttle traverses thousands of kilometers around the planet to maintain no more than 1.5 gravities of deceleration. The first space capsules, like Apollo, had much shorter horizontal tracks by hitting a maximum deceleration in the 6 to 7 gravity range. The dropships will sustain 9 gravities through much of the descent, shortening that track even further. A side effect will be even bigger fire displays. Bobby's eyes lit up at the thought. Following a predictable path meant death, so the dropship rolled violently, using its asymmetrical aerodynamics to jink around within the maelstrom of fire. Well, Bobby, it feels a little different when you're here, thought Deanna. She could not help but think about why the non-commissioned troops called it a crash chair. It was a bitterly cold day. The bison were safely tucked away in the barns, and the relentless wind scoured the snow and ice from the beige stubble of the fields. Not a single bird marred the blank sky. 18-year-old Anna stood at the kitchen table and stared at the curt government statement, as if that would somehow change the words. Order to report for induction. Anna had never been anywhere. Now the government needed cannon fodder. When she showed the statement to her father, he acted like being inducted was her fault, that whether through spite or a character flaw, she was doing this to him. There was a long, brittle silence before he said, "You're an idiot." Then he turned and walked stiffly away. She found him later in the living room, a glass in one hand and a bottle of Crown Royal in the other, staring at the picture of him and her mother. The tighter he tries to hang on to his world, the smaller it gets, sublimating like old snow in the winter sun, Anna thought. She picked up what few possessions she would take and walked alone to the main road. To make drop ships as small of targets as possible, their design sacrificed regenerative life support and ascent engines. Parachutes and large landing jets were also excluded because time above the ground is not your friend. It was a fast one-way trip to the planet's surface, with only the air in the cabin until the door opened. If you landed in deep water, you were screwed. If the lander bounced, landed on a slope and rolled over, or otherwise ended out such that you couldn't open the door, you were screwed. Theoretically, if you hit good ground, the impact impulse would not exceed 20 gravities, but even that much was likely to be very painful and sometimes cause internal damage. Humans had never tried this before, and the brass acknowledged that losses on landing could be very high. They thoughtfully dropped a lot of dropships to make up for it, which somehow wasn't much consolation to Anna. The group of infantry in a single dropship is called a stick, a term that dates back to the days of paratroopers when the loadmaster would use a stick of chalk to count on the outside of the aircraft how many paratroopers had been loaded on board. The pilots needed this information for weight and balance calculations. Anna's stick was gathered for their pre-drop briefing. Lieutenant Bowman explained that dropships would be deployed all along the planned track for the heavies, the big shuttles capable of carrying armored units down and dropships back up. Our symbol is the hammer, Thor's hammer, because when the need is immediate and extreme, we fall on the enemy like a thunderbolt from the skies. Our mission is to locate the DIT ground-to-space weapon sites so the Navy can pound them to dust from above, he said. Dropships are one way. If we cannot secure the entire entry corridor for the heavies, there is no plan B. So remember, focus on securing the corridor, not on engaging the DITed ground troops directly. That said, we can expect the DITs to be less than cooperative about this plan, so make sure your weapons are clean and working smoothly, and you have a full load of ammunition. Anna always had confusing emotions when being talked to by Lieutenant Bowman. On the one hand, he was smart, fair, and trying very hard to be a good stick leader. But on the other hand, the compelling blue eyes, the firm features, the confident set of his shoulders all had a disturbing physical resemblance to the way her father looked in the old picture. Especially his eyes. It made Anna feel like she was on the verge of disappointing him, and she tended to withdraw whenever he looked at her. It was, Anna felt, ironic that Lieutenant Bowman elicited those feelings in her when she had been led to believe it would typically be a sergeant's job to make privates feel small. Anna's sergeant, Sergeant Sorensen, sitting to her left at the briefing, fit the stereotype. He was a massive, boxy hulk of a Dane, with military chopped blonde hair and that projecting "you are nothing" voice that all sergeants must go to a special school to learn. So it very much surprised Anna when Sergeant Sorensen put his huge paw over her trembling fingers and said, "I, too, am scared. But do your job through your fear, and the worst that will happen is that Freya will welcome you home as one of her own." Anna had no clue who Freya was, but the sergeant's actions did stop her from shaking for a while. Anna was jarred from her memories by the crushing impact as the dropship, to use the term loosely, landed. It was good ground, and the dropship came to rest upright, hull intact, and buried just shy of the base of the door. It would have been a textbook drop if only the patch of prairie they landed in hadn't already been occupied. The scream of tortured air was replaced by the church bell cacophony of spent shell casings pouring across the armor plating as the Navy bus drivers moved from landing the dropship to manning the top guns. Lieutenant Bowman shouted from the back of the infantry tube, "Hot landing! Everybody up! Everybody out! Get clear of the ship before they lay in their artillery on us." Anna did not make friends easily, and of the 30 soldiers comprising her stick, the only one she was truly comfortable around was Private Flores. Anna was attracted to him because, although his appearance was utterly different from Bobby, his mannerisms and presence were the same. Private Flores was a wiry kid, small-boned and medium height. His smooth olive skin stretched over high cheekbones. His hands were beautiful, long-fingered, and strong. English was not his first language. Anna understood he was from somewhere far south of Calgary, but like her father, Anna was a little weak on geography, or much of anything, really, beyond the expansive flat horizon of the northern prairie. 29 soldiers disentangled themselves from their now deflated cocoons and took position for disembarkation. As they did so, Anna noted that Private Flores, in the cocoon across from her, was not moving, a trace of blood showing in his nose and at the corner of his mouth. Turning toward the door, Anna was now facing the backpack of Sergeant Sorensen. Somehow, the same Mullet modular lightweight load-carrying equipment. The dwarfed Anna looked like a knapsack on the broad, muscular back of the Viking before her. When the door dropped, the sergeant would be first on the ground, followed by Anna and then the other still mobile privates, with Lieutenant Bowman bringing up the rear. Lined up in the metal confines of the dropship, Anna wondered if this is how Bison felt waiting in line to enter the knocking chute. It was Anna's first time participating in the slaughter of the mature bison. The bull had been cajoled into the tight confines of the metal knocking chute, awaiting its fate. Anna reached in with the captive bolt stunner, positioned it on the bull's forehead, and fired. The bull staggered, its 1,000-kilo mass of fur and muscle slamming against the side of the knocking chute with a distinctive thump. But it was Anna's first time, and the positioning of the stunner hadn't been good. She watched in horror as the bison's eyes rolled in their sockets, seemingly looking right at her. Her father had to reach in with the backup stunner to finish the job. As Anna held her weapon ready, she became acutely aware that the cacophony of shell casings had stopped, but the ping of incoming rounds had not. Had the Navy guys topside run out of ammunition, or were they dead? Just then, Sergeant Sorensen released the door. The heavy armored door dropped onto the firm grassy turf beyond, with a sound like a bison falling against the side of the knocking chute. Once down, the door formed a ramp with only a minor downslope, a testament to how far the dropship had buried itself in the prairie loam. The sergeant stepped onto the ramp, where a barrage of incoming rounds from the right tore through him. As he fell forward along the ramp, his body twisting slightly to face the enemy in death, Anna threw herself to the ramp on his left, using the massive hulk of the Viking as cover. Bringing her weapon over the top of him, she saw a veritable wall of Dytids swarming across the prairie toward them. She sprayed rounds into the swarm, as the top guns had done earlier, but what the Dytids lacked in tactics, they made up for in numbers. They just kept coming. However, the Dytid line was becoming ragged. Anna noticed, without really thinking about it, that their middle legs had locking knees, just like human legs. As a result, as the Dytids died, they didn't drop down vertically, but tended to either tip forward or slump backward before dropping, momentarily blocking the view for the Dytids behind them. Anna shouted for cover fire and rolled over the dead sergeant without waiting to see who was listening. Stooping low, she took off, running directly toward the latest Dytids to die. Anna's mind went to a briefing during boot camp. There is an expectation that an interstellar species will have a certain level of socialization, that they will try to communicate first and attack only when communication fails, that they understand interspecies trade increases the wealth of each side, that they will recognize that other interstellar species have value and a right to exist as a culture. The Ditids aren't like that. The Ditids spread like army ants, sending out scouts in every direction and then massing in the direction of found food or resources. That's all anybody else is to them, food or resources. They don't build their own, they only take. Dodging around the corpses in front, Anna found herself face to hip with the mass of still living Ditids. She pounded 2 shots into the bug at her front right and 2 more into the bug at her front left, before shooting the one directly in front of her. Shooting them in the head was impractical from her angle, so Anna tried to shoot them in the thorax instead, but she was too close. She got 1 shot into the lower thorax for the one directly in front, but the second shot tore through the Ditid's abdomen, releasing a shower of gooey and slightly chunky gray-green slime. As the ballast of viscera and abdominal fluid drained from the back end of the Ditid, it tipped forward on its rigid middle legs like a teeter-totter, threatening to come down right on top of her. With nowhere else to go, Anna ran forward to stand, hunched over between those 2 tall legs. But the bug kept tipping, its abdomen rising higher and higher. Soon, Anna was going to be exposed again, so when the abdomen got clear of her line of sight, she fired 2 rounds into the bug to her front right, 2 to her front left, and then, as the abdomen rose higher still, 2 into the bug now in front of her. Again, the first round went into its abdomen, which she could get a clear shot at first, and the second into its thorax. Holding her mouth tightly closed, she ran through the shower of guts from the first bug to stand between the middle legs of the second bug. The Ditids were packed so close together that Anna found herself falling into a rhythm. 2 shots right, 2 shots left, 2 shots forward, clamp her mouth closed, and run. It was chipping time. Anna's job was to grab the young bison's horns and twist its head around until the bison dropped on its side. Then her father would insert the branding microchip under the skin just ahead of its hump. "Hold him still," her father kept shouting at her. The first dozen calves went without issue, but as Anna was holding the current bison youngster down, a yearling bull wandered over. His bulbous nose dominated his meaty features as he proceeded to lick the salt off Anna's face with his long, raspy blue tongue. Using all her strength to hold the calf still, Anna could not push the yearling away. Bison breath was, she concluded, the very worst smell Anna had ever encountered. The abdominal fluid shower Anna was running through was way, way worse than bison breath. And as Anna killed yet another Ditid, she marveled that she could breathe at all without gagging. She had no way of knowing. 2 shots right, 2 shots left, 2 shots forward, clamp and run. That the goo was probably saving her life. Where humans see mostly with their eyes, Ditids, like many insects, see their world predominantly through smell and vibration. Sight for them is a secondary sense, like hearing is for humans. As a result, the pungent goo rendered Anna nearly undetectable to the Ditids. They had no idea what was causing the havoc in their midst and kept crowding closer to try to find out. 2 shots right, 2 shots left, 2 shots forward, clamp, and run. Lieutenant Bowman said to get away from the dropship, so Anna ran. She was only vaguely aware of other shots being fired around her, indicating that other infantry had also gotten clear of the dropship. 2 shots right, 2 shots left, 2 shots forward, clamp, and run. Bobby pointed at one of the screens on his desk. "Look at this, Anna. Our Navy has taken the high ground from the Ditids." "Isn't our Navy just a few interstellar freighters with weapons strapped on?" said Anna, wrinkling her forehead at the screen. "Yes," said Bobby. "I mean, historically, practically all navies start out as merchant ships with guns attached, until the government can build real combat ships. But here's the odd thing. The Ditid ships are also unarmed merchant ships. Who in their right mind would start an invasion with unarmed ships? In fact, they are saying that the salvaged Ditid ships seem to be remarkably poorly designed for Ditid anatomy. This discussion is all over the web. From the permanent comfort of his wheelchair, Bobby had access to much more diverse information sources than the sole grievance news network that Anna's father depended on. One of the prevailing theories is that the Ditids did not actually build their ships at all. Maybe somebody else tried to colonize their world, not realizing the Ditids were a threat, and their colonies got overrun. 2 shots right, 2 shots left, 2 shots forward, clamp and run. Anna felt the ground tremor under her and sensed the Ditids bunching tighter and further getting in each other's way. There was no doubt that, in the years following the arrival of Ditids on Aru, the Ditids had added human ships and weapons to their arsenal. Ships and weapons captured from overrun settlements. The humans, meanwhile, were building up a real navy, a purpose-built navy. 2 shots right, 2 shots left, 2 shots forward, clamp and run. Anna felt the ground tremor again. Anna was out by the marsh. It was just before twilight, and the barn swallows were eating insects off the water's surface. She watched them swoop down, skim just above the water for an instant, pick a bug out of it, swoop back up to altitude, and then turn for the next pass. With the third tremor, Anna realized a Ditid surface-to-space installation somewhere to her left just bit the dust. Far above her, a brave Terran destroyer was skimming the atmosphere like a barn swallow, providing fire support to some infantry spotter on the ground before pulling away for another pass. Not all the dropships had come down within shooting range of a Ditid swarm, the lucky bastards. 2 shots left, 2 shots right, 2 shots forward, clamp and run. 2 shots left, 2 shots right, 2 shots forward, clamp and run. As the abdomen of the latest dying Ditid lifted, Anna swept her weapon around in a near trance. The only sound in her ears was the roar of adrenaline. Clear left, clear right, clear forward, clamp and run. Clear left, clear right, clear forward, clamp and... Anna paused, trying to make sense of the empty prairie ahead of her that looked so much like home. A gentle breeze rustled the flowers under a warm sun. A quiet voice slowly permeated the fog of her mind. She wondered if it was that Freya woman that Sergeant Sorensen spoke of. But no, this sounded more like a male voice. Private. Jones. Private. Jones. Stand. Down. Anna shifted her rifle until it rested stock high and barrel low as she slowly turned. Lieutenant Bowman stood 3 or 4 meters behind her, hunched over, hands on his knees, trying to breathe. Spread out in a broad V behind him, a few other soldiers had taken a similar stance. All of them were coated with thick, ghillie suits of bug viscera, testimony that those who survived had followed Anna's example of getting under the beetles. Lieutenant Bowman began laughing and, raising his gaze to her, said, "Private Jones, goddamn, you are fast." In his eyes, so like those of her father, Anna saw something she had never seen before: respect. The start of a smile pulled at the corner of Anna's mouth. She looked past the lieutenant to the field of dead Ditids, their brown bodies resembling the humps of sleeping bison. Beyond them sat the distant dropship. Anna raised her eyes and watched the dark silhouette of a heavy silently descending through the clear blue sky.